Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. BYU football kicks off the 2025 season in 12 days. We cannot wait. We are starved for BYU football. I'm hyped that week 0 is kicking off this week in Dublin with K-State, Iowa State. I love that. I hope we get to a point, this is just kind of a side tangent, I hope we see a day where BYU plays an international game again. Is there any program, like, yes, Notre Dame, absolutely, they're great in that Ireland game. But is there any program better fit for BYU than BYU for an international game? I don't think so. Now, BYU is not going to bring the booze. Sales. They're not gonna load up the pubs. They'll eat the food, but they're not going to load up the pubs and be drinking some Guinnesses. But Cougar Nation would show up in Ireland. They would. They would be there. I'd love to be there. I hope to see one day in my coverage of BYU an international game, whether it's Mexico, Ireland. It just makes too much sense, man. Show off the global fan base. It would be a huge moment. I'm really intrigued to see what the fan base and the turnouts look like for K-State, Iowa State. Iowa State was a big bust in the Big 12 championship game. Like, where you at? There are more BYU fans in Arlington last year than Iowa State fans. I bet Kansas State will have more, but we shall see. Cannot wait. Week 0 kicks off this week. BYU kicks it off on week 1 against Portland State. Let's dive into, as you see, my game-by-game picks for BYU football in 2025. ESPN FPI has BYU going roughly 8-4. Last year, the FPI had BYU 5-7, which a bit surprising because the FPI has been pretty spot on with BYU prior to 2024. Like, they've been nails on BYU. And this year they got them at 8-4. And maybe I'm in the same viewpoint there, but let's dive into it. Game-by-game picks for the 2025 season. Game number 1, Portland State. We will see Portland State in action this week as they take on Tarleton State in week 0. We'll find out who Portland State's quarterback is going to be. They've had a starting quarterback competition throughout camp. We'll see some Barney ball in action. Bruce Barnum. Back in the day, in 2017, this is a side story. Bruce Barnum, I was working at another radio station at the time, and he called BYU the Monsters of the West. Kind of like the Monsters of the Midway, Chicago Bears, Monsters of the West. I can't get over that. I hope to maybe cross paths with Barney Ball, Bruce Barnum, before BYU, Portland State, but to bring that up, he's a good quote, that's for sure. But Portland State has no chance against BYU. That will be a beatdown. No matter the quarterback, that's a beatdown. Alex Caressa is not coming through that door for the Vikings. He's just not. BYU rolls with ease over Portland State. Week 2, I think BYU rolls with ease over Stanford. The Cardinal, like Portland State, are also in action in week 0. Stanford's going to be in Hawaii, taking on the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors in Honolulu. They're going to go with Ben Gulbranson at starting quarterback, former Oregon State transfer. That could have been Bear Bachmeier on the farm. I do think Frank Reich is going to keep Stanford out of the ACC cellar. I think they've got some decent talent, but still, it's a transition year, only a 1-year coach. It's going to take time. Andrew Luck, he's going to build that thing up. But Stanford football has been dormant for about 5 years now. They've just been irrelevant. Since COVID, Stanford has been out of sight, out of mind. While BYU has thrived, COVID and post-COVID, it sunk Stanford football. COVID had just wrecked Stanford football to where they're just not even in the conversation nationally anymore. Heck, they almost got left out in realignment. And it seemed like no one cared. And then they got a token invite to the ACC because of their elite academics. That's really what probably came down to, where it's like, how does Stanford not have a power conference home? Well, it makes a lot of sense because Does anyone care out there other than Andrew Luck about sports? So that's the challenge in front of him. But I think BYU wins. At East Carolina, week 4, game number 3. A bye week smashed in between. Back in January, I was roasting BYU for having this bye week. I did not like it. I still don't like it. But as time has gone by, I can accept it a little more because of the quarterback situation. You give the quarterback, potentially Bear Bachmeier, an extra week to prep for a two time zone game out on the East Coast. So I'm okay with that. I think that early buys, though, I just don't like them. I do not like them because you wait, and then you only get 2 games and then take a week off. Come on. Let's get that bye, maybe General Conference weekend. I felt the move for Tom Holmoe when he was AD should have been get rid of the East Carolina game, schedule a G5 home game, and then you have 7 home games, and then you do it in week 3. Imagine that. The next quarterback, potentially Bear Bachmeier, you go through non-conference at home and probably start 3-0 with ease. I think you still get to 3-0. I think BYU beats East Carolina, but East Carolina going to be a good offense. Returning quarterback who took over when the current head coach became the interim. There was a little bit of a transition there. He took over, and they've got some stud receivers. They got one of the best receivers in the American. They also got a transfer, I believe, from Oklahoma. This will be a really good offense and a good test for BYU. They've got a lot of questions, though, on the defensive side. Their head coach has got a background as the defensive coordinator at ECU, so he'll probably get them right, but they lost a ton of personnel. I'm not expecting much defensively from ECU. I think BYU wins that game, but I expect it to be maybe within a touchdown. Will Cougar fans be okay with that? Will they be panicking? I hope not, because I'm telling you, folks, just win football games. It's not a bad thing to just win 24-17 and ride LJ Martin and Sione Moa. It's not a bad thing. Shrink that football game, get it less than 3 hours, and go about your weekend and just win the ball game. So I've got BYU coming out of non-conference at 3-0. And that would be quite the accomplishment for the new quarterback. And then you kick off Big 12 play under the lights in Folsom Stadium. Man, it's been since 81? Gosh, 1982? Maybe it was 81 when Steve Young came in relief of Jim McMahon. 81, Folsom Field. BYU goes to Boulder. I cannot wait for this one. Coach Prime, the Buffs, revenge opportunity for Colorado. That Alamo Bowl game, BYU just annihilated them. But new quarterback, as you see, Caden Salter potentially could be the guy. Maybe it's Juju Lewis, who's on the Taco Bell Cups out in Boulder these days. I can't wait for this game, though. This is a great matchup out of the chute in Big 12 play. Colorado got a lot bigger in the interior of their defensive line. Jaheim Oates comes in from Alabama. And I bring that up because the size of Colorado was noticeable against BYU, how small they were. BYU had such a size advantage over the Buffs. They got bigger, though, in the interior. They're still kind of light at the defensive end spots, 250. But they got speed, though. Their offensive line is going to be much improved with Jordan Seaton returning. I think Colorado wins this game. I think BYU drops this one. Colorado teams under Coach Prime have been known to get off to fast starts both years. Even 2 years ago when they were 4-8, they jumped out to a quick start. I think Colorado will be a tough out for BYU, and I think they have their first L of the season in Boulder against the Buffs. BYU then returns home on a Friday night game, General Conference weekend, to take on West Virginia. I think BYU wins that game. I don't know what to reasonably expect from West Virginia. They've got a good backfield, though. Jaheim White, first-team All-Big 12 preseason selection at running back. I think Nico Martial is not bad. I thought when he stepped in relief of Garrett Green for the Mountaineers when he got nicked up, I thought he was a pretty good quarterback. I remember that Oklahoma State game in particular when they went to Stillwater. He did a really good job. I think Rich Rod will do nice things with Martial. I just, again, personnel-wise, I don't know what to expect from them. You're probably talking about 60, 70 plus new players on that roster, 50 from the portal, which I'm okay with a first-year coach because you're getting guys that are going to fit what you want, but it's hard to expect. I just still think coming out west, 10:30 p.m. body clock game for West Virginia, that's going to be tough. I think BYU wins that football game. They get to the midway point of the season at Arizona, and Arizona last year was one of the biggest disappointments in college football. 2 years ago, I thought they were one of the best teams in college football. And this might sound like, hey, this applies to someone that we know quite well. An incredible performance in the Alamo Bowl, and at season's end 2 years ago, Arizona looked like one of the best teams in the country. Sounds like BYU. Hopefully BYU doesn't have an Arizona slip like the Wildcats did last year. Arizona plummeted to 3-9. They had 60 less yards passing through the air. They were -4 in turnovers. I think they will be better. I still think they're going to be fighting for bowl eligibility. This will be a close game, and there will probably be some side antics in the stands because what we've grown to know with BYU visiting the old Pac-12 venues, that just always happens, whether it's Arizona State in football, Arizona basketball. BYU knows the drill. There's probably going to be some side antics at these old Pac-12 venues. It's going to be heated. It's going to be a really good football game. I think BYU escapes and gets to 5-1 at the midway point. We'll reel through the back half of the schedule here. Utah, game number 7. I think this is going to be one heck of a matchup. The trench warfare between these two will be must-see TV. Keanu Tanavasa going up against Lomu, Kump, Spencer Fano. I can't wait for that. That is going to be must-see. I cannot wait to see how BYU's defense goes up against Devin Dampier, New Mexico Lobos transfer. And I expect this to be a defensive slugfest. I think you're talking 17-16. I'm going to pick BYU wins this game. They're at home. It's at LDS for the first time since 2021. BYU's looking for a 3-game win streak in the rivalry for the first time. Gosh, you got to go back years, man. You got to go back to the days of Ty Detmer back in the day to go back to 3 in a row. It's been a long time since BYU won 3 in a row in this rivalry, and I can only imagine how angry that will make Kyle Whittingham if BYU gets 3 in a row over him. But I am going to pick the Cougs to get it done in a close one over the Utes in the rivalry game. Then they go on the road at Iowa State in Ames. And I think this is the game that everyone's just chalking up and saying, oh, this will be an automatic loss because of the Utah hangover. And I do believe in that. I subscribe to that. I think it's real. But remember, there's been years in Kalani's seasons where, oh, that's going to be an automatic loss. Remember Michigan State in year 1, 2016? Everyone said that's going to be an automatic L. Michigan State coming off the playoff, this and that. And then, of course, BYU goes to the Banks, the Red Cedar, and wins that football game. We always, when there's ever just almost unanimous line of thought, we probably should zig, and while everyone's zagging, we should go in a different direction. But I will agree and say Iowa State will be a loss, but I do think BYU will be in this football game. I don't think there's going to be many games where BYU gets blown out. Yeah, Iowa State lost a lot at wide receiver, but they're really good at home. They only lost 1 football game at home last year, and that was to Texas Tech, who BYU then goes on the road to 2 weeks later out in West Texas in Lubbock. First visit to Lubbock since the 40s, 1940s. It's been 80-plus years. And Texas Tech is my pick to win the Big 12 this year. I'm all in, man. I'm buying into the hype, the money. I'm all in. Now, the thing is with Texas Tech, they've got a great transfer portal class, which has been much discussed. Second nationally in 24/7 Sports. They also got a lot of returning production, too. Last week, I was on with Phil Steele here on the podcast, and He talked about homegrown talent, homegrown teams. Texas Tech's 33rd. They bring back a lot. It's not like it was a bare cupboard and it was a total restart. There's good personnel. And I think an underrated addition to Texas Tech is their defensive coordinator hire, Shao Wood. Excellent DC hire. He had one of the best defenses in the Big 12 last year at Houston. Remember, Houston was averaging 14 points a game, and they still knocked off teams like Kansas State in the Big 12 because of that defense. And you pair him up with David Bailey as an edge rusher, man, Lee Hunter, Texas Tech is for real. They're going to win that game. If there's a game where BYU maybe gets blown out, it's this one. Texas Tech takes down BYU. Then BYU comes back home and faces TCU. And TCU is my pick to join Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game in Arlington. A lot returning personnel-wise for Andy Avalos in his second year running that 3-3-5 scheme. Josh Hoover, of course, who had what was like his breakout performance against BYU 2 years ago. TCU, I think, wins in Provo. So I have BYU going on a 3-game skid in the second half of the season. They close out the year at Cincinnati. The Bearcats might have the best wide receiver unit in the Big 12. BYU will be up for the challenge by that point, I would think. It's always tricky, 2 time zone game. It'll be tough. Eastern time zone game. You know, that could be a noon Eastern, 10 a.m. body clock. Maybe we'll see. But I've got BYU winning that football game. But Cincinnati will go to a bowl game this year. I'm buying into the Bearcats a little more. I still get a little leery of the Scott Satterfield hire. I just never feel like it's been a fit at all. And honestly, Luke Fickell going to Wisconsin, that hasn't been a fit. He should have just stayed at Cincinnati. He could have been a legend. He could have had Cincinnati as one of the best programs in the Big 12 had he stayed. Sometimes it's better. The grass is not always greener, man. Just stay. But I got Cougs taking down the Bearcats. And then the season finale in the regular season, I've got BYU taking down UCF. I've got UCF as my last place team in the Big 12. I could be wrong, but I just think there's too much unknowns, and I don't know what to reasonably expect in the second go-round with Scott Frost in that job. Rebuild year in year one. I got BYU taking down the Knights. So I've got BYU going 8-4. That's what I've got. 8-4. So I'm kind of in lockstep with the ESPN FPI. What say you? Do you agree with me? Give a comment below in the comments and write your projected record for BYU in the comments below. Let's take our final timeout. On the other side, we'll get to the Cougar Stock Exchange. What's trending up? What's trending down in BYU sports? We'll hit on that next.